Welcome to Day 7 on the Trail. We have 4 readings for today from Luke 2, verse 41 through chapter 3, verse 38, Genesis 11, 1 through 27, Psalms 11 through 14, and Sirach chapter 6, verses 2 through 37. In Genesis 11, we have the story of the Tower of Babel. The flood has ended, and humanity has, in a sense, a fresh start. So why are they choosing to build this tower? What is motivating them? Were they truly trying to get to God? Well, most likely that's not the case. This was not their actual intention. In fact, the Tower of Babel was most likely a structure that we call a ziggurat, a structure around 7 levels high, reaching about 300 feet. But the question remains, what was the point of this structure? One very important detail in this story is the decision by the builders to construct their great tower on a plain in the land of Shinar. However, if your intention was to build a tower that was going to reach to heaven, would you lay your foundations on a plain? Perhaps a better idea would be to start on a mountain, where you can give yourself a head start. After all, where would you find stones used for building your tower? Most likely, you would find them on or near a mountain. Instead, in the story we are told that they will have to use bricks and bitumen as construction materials. This would have required additional work. Also, keep in mind that in Genesis chapter 9, God had commanded Noah and his family to fill the earth. Instead, their descendants have decided to gather on a plain where they can build a great city. Why? Well, we are told directly in Genesis 11:4. Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Now, the second half of this verse is in direct opposition to God's command to fill the earth. However, it is the first half of this verse that is actually the most troublesome, and a tower with its top in the heavens. In the ancient Near East, mountains were viewed as places where the sky touched the earth. In a sense, the mountains held the dome of the sky in place. Therefore, if you wanted to meet with God, you would climb to the closest location where the heavens and earth met. That would be a mountain. Therefore, mountains became sacred spaces. We have examples of this throughout the Bible, such as Mount Sinai, Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Mount Carmel, the Mount of Transfiguration, the Mount of the Beatitudes, and the mountain in Galilee where Jesus ascends into heaven. However, if you have decided to live on a plain, mountains are probably pretty far away. So you would have to travel great distances to reach them, which is at best inconvenient. Therefore, perhaps the Tower of Babel is not so much about getting so high that you can go to where God is, but rather moving God to where you are, moving God to a place that is more convenient for you. And there will be no place more accessible and convenient than that in the midst of the city you are building. In fact, when God sees the tower that they are building, we are told that he has to come down to see the tower. On the one hand, this is a bit ironic if the great tower that they are building is supposed to reach to the heavens. But on the other hand, the author also wants us to know that when God judges, God comes down to know for himself what is happening. God does not judge from afar. He judges justly and with careful investigation. So he comes down to investigate the situation for himself. We will see a similar action by God in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, after witnessing the construction of the tower, God decides to disrupt the element that unifies them, their common language. In verse 1, we are told that the people had one language. So now, God is going to disrupt the very thing that unifies them, to cause them to do what He wanted them to do in the first place, to spread out and fill the earth. In the story of the Tower of Babel, we also see another example of a motif that is woven throughout the book of Genesis. That is, the punishment fits the crime. As we saw in the story of Adam, Eve, and the serpent in the Garden of Eden, each is punished relative to the sin they committed. Once again, God is not capricious in His judgment, but He judges justly. The sin of the Tower of Babel is not in building the tower per se. Instead, the problem is trying to make God fit into our terms, to take what God has given us to do and modify it so it best fits our plans and agenda. And unfortunately, in our modern world, this has not changed. The second text that I want to look at today is from the Wisdom of Sirach, chapter 6. In verses 14 through 16, we find a definition of a false friend and a true friend. Faithful friends are a sturdy shelter. Whoever finds one has found a treasure. Faithful friends are beyond price. No amount can balance their worth. Faithful friends are life-saving medicine, and those who fear the Lord will find them. I love this definition of friendship. However, as I read it, I'm reminded of something else. Not only should I be looking to find faithful friends, but also, perhaps I should work at becoming a faithful friend. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.